Alrighty. Hopefully, all of my audio and everything is working well. Steven has been waylaid. Apparently, he should be here in a little bit. So I'm just gonna kind of kill a little bit of time until he shows up. So I'm hoping that I didn't have an opportunity to have him like confirm that my audio and everything works well. So we're just gonna hope that it's working, and if not, we'll figure it out as we go. All right. Give you guys some time to hop in here. What's up, folks? We got a couple, Cooper and Giovanni. How's it going, guys? We're TBD on Mr. Messina. I don't know if he is he still out fighting poverty. I don't know. That's a very good question. Last I heard, he was. Last I heard, I think he was at the doctor or something like that. So maybe he had an appointment that went long. All right, let me close this window and check on the stream over here on Facebook. It is working just fine. So today, hopefully Steven will make it because he had some epic rants planned that he wanted to get into. So I'm hoping that we get to hear that. I've been listening to him rant for the last couple of days. I'm doing well, Cooper. How are you? I'm very tired. I'm tired and feel a little harried, but I'm excited for this show. I think we're gonna have some fun talking about the stuff that we're going to talk about today. I was just before we got started here, I was scrolling through the Atlantic because I've been noticing over the last couple of days, or maybe a couple weeks, it's like the headlines that are coming out of the Atlantic are insane. They've got some absolutely they are ramping up the rhetoric over there. And I my understanding is that let me confirm the specific details. So there's Steve Jobs' widow, Lorene Powell Jobs. I know she was very anti-Trump, and she has some sort of a significant role with the Atlantic, is my understanding. The Atlantic. Okay, so she founded in 2004. Powell Jobs founded the Emerson Collective, a private company structured as a limited liability company that supports social entrepreneurs and organizations working in education and immigration reform, social justice, media and journalism, and conservation through partnerships, grants, and investments. Through Emerson, Powell Jobs owns The Atlantic and a stake in Axios. There you go. There is your government right there. That is the regime. That's exactly how they operate through through these philanthropic companies, support social entrepreneurs and organizations working in education and immigration, yada yada yada. Yeah, it's very they make it seem so anodyne, and it very much is not. Okay, so let me make sure that this link gets out onto Twitter. So one of the headlines I was scrolling past, it said that unvaccinated people need to bear the burden. Was one of the headlines, and I was like, "Good grief!" And they're not beating around the bush. They're getting very explicit about their intent. And if you've been paying attention, if you've been listening to this show for a while, you understand that headlines like that are an indicator of where things are going. Headlines are not there to inform; they're there to they are there to inform. They're there to indoctrinate primarily. They're to dictate to you what you're supposed to believe, what you're supposed to think. And once you start seeing headlines like that, it's just a matter of time before the stuff that they're talking about is gonna come to pass, because the people who are writing the headlines are educated through the universities. They're indoctrinated by radical ideologues. The people who are approving the headlines are the people who were the most dedicated to those institutions. The people who are greenlighting all of this and funding all of this, these are all people who are all directly connected to the university system, to the the structure of the modern regime, the cathedral, as Mitchell Moldbug called it. This is the way that it operates. They generate the headlines, they push the headlines out, they establish the narrative, they create the narrative, and then they go and they do interviews and they put questions to politicians related to the narrative. People are talking about this. Oh, you have to respond to the people who are talking about. Why are the people talking about? Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's because we told them to talk about this. That obviously isn't. This is you don't pull the curtain back and show the Wizard of Oz. You don't show the man behind the curtain. That's what we do here. But so they this is how they create the news. They set the narrative. They set the 3 by 5 card of allowable opinion, and they dictate to society the choices that they are supposed to make when they go into the ballot box. So by the time it gets to actually voting, where the part it's supposed to be like the democracy part, the part where people are like represented, like our will is represented in the leadership and all that. By the time it gets to that point, that action of voting is not it's not you expressing your sovereign will, and it's not that you considered all the facts and you came to just this is the logical conclusion. No, this is you regurgitating back your approved opinion. You are dictate you are not dictating, but you are you're declaring that you have received proper training, that you have your it's your test. This is your test. This is like in the university sense, where you've sat and you've taken training all quarter, and so now you have to do your midterm or your final, and you have to go in and you have to give all the right answers. That's the function of voting in a democracy like this, and something that's functionally a democracy like this. So the the university system, the media, the corporate press, the all the NGOs that are putting out all these headlines, all the experts, all the bureaucratic organizations within the federal government, all these different, all the science nonprofits, and all these sorts of things. All these organizations are all in the process of engineering society, of manufacturing consent. There's your word. They're manufacturing the consent, and uh, so ultimately, the people are directed by their institutions. The institutions are not directed by the people. They don't exist to serve the people. The people exist to serve the institutions, and that narrative is being laid bare. It's becoming more and more clear that that's exactly what's going on. And so, as people begin to, as their trust in the institutions begins to break down, you start seeing chaos. As people no longer know what to believe, they don't know. They don't know what their uh, they've spent their entire life with a specific picture being painted to them about how the world works, and how history has happened, and the trends in science, and geopolitics, and the various different ideological positions occupied by all these different people. All this stuff is all knowledge that has been presented to us, that we've been indoctrinated with through all the different means of all the different media. And eventually, like when it gets to the point where people start realizing that all of that is all a lie, that it's like you get one little thing that kind of smudges that sheen, that veneer of legitimacy, and someone goes to, it's like they got to go like buff out the smudge on that veneer, and they're like, wait, there's another one. They got to go, oh, there's another one, and there's another one. And pretty soon all of a sudden they start to realize that it's like their eyes weren't focused right, and so everything is all completely smudged, and there's nothing, the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. Once that cascading effect begins, once that effect begins, it begins to cascade, and it gets more and more. This is why people get radicalized so fast. And what we're seeing now is a society that it's the sense making has broken down, and people are trying to assemble themselves around a new consensus, and everyone is fighting over the consensus. But it's not all that even of a fight. And as history reveals what happens when a society begins to break down and everyone starts to fight over the consensus, it's not pretty. It gets ugly. So, anyways, uh, do me a favor while you're here for this. Like this stream, and then hey, there's Steven. He's typing. Like this stream, and then share the video and subscribe to the channel. We are, last I saw, we are at, got to open the video up here. Oh, I forgot I was going to share it on Twitter. I'll go do that too. We are currently at 946 subscribers. So we were trying to get to 1,000 before we get booted off of YouTube. And today we're going to use some hot buzzwords that should turn up the heat a little bit. So do us a favor and see if you can get us to 1,000 subscribers before we get booted today or after today's show. I don't know how spicy we're actually going to get, but I know we're definitely gonna. I'm gonna just start using words that I've kind of beat around the bush with before. Um, okay, so let me find the tweet here, and we are live. We are live, or at least I am. Okay. All right. Okay. Looks like Steven probably won't make it in here today, which is fine. I've got some good content here, and we can save his rants for another day. Let me tell him um, while I'm live. I just told everyone that you have some good rants that you want to get in for next time. All right. So Steven has been beside himself with some of the foolishness that's coming out from the it's not even just the blue pilled libertarians. It's there's libertarians that you wouldn't really count as blue pilled that are starting to say and do some really stupid stuff. And I don't want to step on his toes. I don't want to take his I don't want to take his steal his thunder. So uh I'll let him get into it on our next episode. We might do a bonus show in between because yesterday or the day before he was messaging me and he was like, man, I want to go live. I'm going crazy. I've got a bunch of stuff I want to say. And I think he's got a really good point with what he's talking about. It revolves around the vaccine passports and New York City and things ramping up really fast. And specifically, it's this trending topic where now everyone says, "Do not comply." And Stephen has very strong feelings about people. It's like with the issue with Cuba, he had very strong feelings about people focusing on the embargo and like, oh, this is an example of why the state is bad, and just completely missing the actual substance of the situation and like actually engaging with the human beings who are affected by this situation. You know, when you do that, when you start from the position of the person who's actually involved in the situation, you don't abstract it away into this hypothetical of, oh, hypothetically you live in a city where they're trying to force this evil policy on you, so you do not comply. Okay, that works hypothetically, but in reality, that's not. If you do not comply, that's not going to work out very well for you. If you get to the point where you have to do not comply, the battle is lost already. It's you don't go to get to the point of do not comply. You GTFO. So all of this do not comply really should be GTFO. But okay, I've said too much. I've stepped on his toes too much. So what do you say? He said, "My wisdom is to picture everyone on Twitter doing the thing they're telling people to do, or can't believe it isn't happening, and then read it again after you did that." Yeah. So everyone, oh, I can't believe that all this stuff isn't happening. I can't believe people aren't rioting. I can't believe that people aren't putting up a fight. I can't believe that people aren't. Okay, well, are you doing that? Are you if you're criticizing other people for not rioting, are you rioting? Are you trying to start a riot? I mean, I'm not saying you should, but no one's stopping you from doing it. So a lot of these people talk a big game on Twitter, and a lot of people say, "Oh, it's just Twitter. It's not real life." And this is real life. Twitter is more real life than just about anything else, because the rest of life is following Twitter. So what's happening there is gonna happen elsewhere eventually. I've been telling you guys this. I keep harping on this. Twitter is effectively our society now. That's where what happens on Twitter is what happens in the real world. It's Twitter is the real world 6 months from now. So or maybe even less in some cases. So that's if you've been on Twitter for any amount of time, you'll recognize that, you'll understand that, and you'll realize the people oh, it's just social media, it's just whatever, it doesn't matter. Those people are it's precious, it's cute, but social media is real, and it affects the real world, and increasingly so. As we part of the effect of all of this is going to be a lot more atomization and isolation of people. And so people are going to move to social media even more. They're going to continue moving to social media, and the lines between social media um and the real world actually interacting physically with people are going to be or they're going to continue to be blurred through things like AR and VR. Those lines are getting pretty smudgy. So what's happening in social media is really just it seems foreign, and you're like, oh, this isn't how people act in the real world. That's because the social media interactions are new. This form of human beings relating to each other is new. This medium, but it's changing the rest of the world, not the other way around. The new thing is the one that's dragging everything else with it. So the this is a if you just poo poo it as it's social media, it doesn't matter. That's good. You're going to get hit by a truck pretty soon. Metaphorically speaking, you're going to realize just how much all of this stuff did matter, and that you're kind of too late now. So yeah, Poppy Lives, if you want to hop on, you're welcome to. Um, Mark, what's up, Mark Metz? He says, do not comply being shouted from the rooftops by people with large followings seems to be a sort of central planning. The absence of noise, especially in this case, would be more powerful. Interesting. That's actually a really interesting thought. Um, do not comply is honestly as part of what I'm going to read here. That's going to become an even more powerful point, I think, here when I get into reading some of these subjects here, because that there's this dialectic that is being created, and in order to move to the next step in the process, there has to be an opposition. There has to be a resistance. There has to be clear evidence of people um, justifying the next step, justifying the escalation. So all the empty noise, all the bombastic rhetoric is actually it facilitates the the advancement of the agenda. It facilitates it's part of the whole deal. This is part of the way that the state operates. This is why I did an interview a debate a couple days ago with Angela McArdle on Lions of Liberty about do we need another Ron Paul revolution? And I took the negative, that no, we do not need another Ron Paul revolution, because the Ron Paul revolution, the first one, was a failure, and because revolutions are the means by which the state expands its power. Revolutions are the dialectic companion to the the state institutions, and it's the way that they expand and grow their influence and expand their own mandate. Because when there's people who are revolting, that creates a justification for an even more powerful state that can hold down the revolt. And so it's going to be either the whether it's the people who are revolting or the people who are battling against the revolt. Either way, the consequence is going to be a more tyrannical, a more expansive, a more powerful government after the fact. It may not be immediate, but it will lay the groundwork for one. So in the instance of, like, take the American Revolution, that's one that it was different. There was aspects of it that were different than the Russian and the French revolutions, but it was much more like them than not. And ultimately, it created the basis for the largest government, the largest, most powerful, most expansive global government of all time. The groundwork, that government was built upon the groundwork laid by the American Revolution. So if your goal is to stop the expanse of state power, it's paradoxical, but you have to stop fighting it. Because when you fight it, you give it a pretext to grow even more. The way to stop it is to beat it, not to fight it. You want to beat it without fighting. You have to figure out how to do that. If you're fighting it, you've already lost, because by definition, it's the institution that wins every fight or that determines the outcome of every fight. That's the definition of the state. The institution that determines the outcome of every fight. So if you are going to pick a fight with it, you'd better beat it. And the best way to beat it is to put yourself in a position where you win without fighting. That's obviously a very tall task. That takes a lot of it takes a lot of foresight and planning, and it's very possible. Part of the kind of what's baked in here is that um, it's not a fight that you will ever win. So it's not a fight ever worth engaging in. The best way to win that fight is to not fight it at all. I think that's something that's kind of a truth that becomes more and more evident the deeper you get into this. So yeah, we definitely don't need another Ron Paul revolution. But go check out the that debate that I did with Angela. It was, I think that you can for sure get it on the Lions of Liberty Patreon right now. I think you said anything $5 and above will get you in there. And they're really good people. The Lions guys are fantastic. They're the OGs in the Liberty podcasting world, and they've been around for a long time. And they're all three of them are really fantastic dudes, and I appreciate them inviting me on the multiple times that they have. So go support them, give them a little bit of your money, and then you can watch that debate now. All right, so let me run through a couple of these articles. So let me get a drink here. What I kind of want to do is I want to paint a picture for you guys. And a lot of this is probably just preaching to the choir, but that's really the intent of the show, is really to preach to the choir. So I want to kind of frame up the perspective of the people of the enemy. I think that at least for me, I'll speak for myself. I get so embedded in my own perspective that when I encounter their perspective and suddenly like clearly see the world through their eyes, it's so insane and foreign to me. Yet there's a part of it that's familiar because I used to basically be that. I used to kind of have the really generic mainstream view of a lot of things. Not There's a lot of things I was very different on, but there's a lot of I very much at least understood it because I was around it so much. So I saw it and I kind of could choose to hold it or not hold it. But now I've been so far removed from it for so long that when I see it clearly, it's staggering. I see how much these people live in a completely artificial world, but they're the ones who are making the rest of the world into their artificial world, not the other way around, because of the how close they are to the functionings, the workings of the regime, and because um their cause is, I mean, it's from the regime in the first place. It was implanted in them from the regime. So it doesn't matter whether they're living in the real world or not. It doesn't matter how logical or illogical or factual or not factual they are, because they're the ones who are in the position to actually enforce their will on the rest of us. So what I want to I want to make that really clear by giving a frame of where they're coming from. So these are all the articles here I have are all from the Atlantic. So the first one is written by Ann Applebaum. Yes, Applebaum. Uh, I will. I won't say anymore. The My Pillow guy really could destroy democracy. That's right. The My Pillow guy could really destroy democracy. In the time I spent with Mike Lindell, I came to learn that he is affable, devout, philanthropic, and a clear threat to the nation. So this is not this ideology is a threat. The My Pillow guy, Mike Lindell, is a threat to the nation. What is a threat to the nation? This is an enemy of the state. She is declaring that Mike Lindell is an enemy of the state or should be treated as an enemy of the state. So just note that language. This is brazen. 10 years ago, I don't think you would see a headliner. I don't think in an what do you call it? An outlet like this, I don't think you would see something this brazen. It's just pretty significant that they're taking a specific private citizen and declaring him an enemy of the state. When you contemplate the end of democracy in America, what kind of person do you think will bring it about? Maybe you picture a sinister billionaire in a bespoke suit, slipping brown envelopes to politicians. Maybe your nightmare is a rogue general hijacking the nuclear football. Maybe you think of a jackbooted thug leading a horde of men in white sheets, all carrying burning crosses. Here is what you probably don't imagine: an affable, self made Midwesterner, one of those goofy businessmen who makes his own infomercials. A recovered crack addict, no less, who laughs good naturedly when jokes are made at his expense. A man who will talk to anyone willing to listen, and to many who aren't. A philanthropist, a good boss. A patriot, or so he says, who may well be doing more damage to American democracy than anyone since Jefferson Davis. Do you see the the sinister nature of what she just did? She took a guy that, like, this description of a guy, this is like, he is an affable, self-made Midwesterner, a goofy businessman who makes his own infomercials, a recovered crack addict who laughs good-naturedly when jokes are made at his expense, who will talk to anyone willing to listen, a philanthropist, a good boss, and a patriot. She just described a very, by all outward appearances, by all every like manifestation of his personality and his character, is a good person, is a genuine, non-threatening, just kind of ordinary, um, noble person. And she's saying, even all of that isn't worth anything. You have to look through all of that and you have to see the sinister heart inside him. You have to see the evil behind this veneer. Think about the psychological effect of that from people who aren't don't see the world the way we do. To For them to, like, as they're reading this, they're like, oh yeah, that Midwesterner. This is our worst nightmare. All those stupid flyover state bumpkins, self-made. He's a good boss. He's got a good sense of humor. All these things, a whole bunch of reasons why people would like him. He's basically Hitler. This is the ground. This is laying the groundwork for dehumanization. This is a dehumanizing process, and it's laying the groundwork for more than dehumanization. This is dehumanization. It's laying the groundwork for depersoning. I met Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow, in the recording studio that occupies the basement of Steve Bannon's stately Capitol Hill townhouse, a few blocks from the Supreme Court. The same Supreme Court that will, according to Lindell, decide 9-0 in favor of reinstating Donald Trump to the presidency sometime in August or possibly September. I made it through the entirety of the Trump presidency without once having to meet Bannon, but here he was recording his War Room podcast with Lindell. Bannon has been decomposing in front of our eyes for some years now, and I can report that this process continues to take its course. I walked in during a break, and the two men immediately gestured to me to join the conversation, sit at the table with them, and listen in on headphones. I demurred. Anne Applebaum. Bannon said. Should have stuck to writing books. Gulag was a great book. How long did it take you to write it? So she goes along here and is describing the basically kind of the generic take from the regime about the everything leading up to January 6th. And she describes Mike Lindell as basically a wacky, deranged conspiracy theorist who is engaged in a sustained plot to destroy America. This is the she lays him out. She describes him that way, and then this is what the rest of the article is. It's all like a fever dream of paranoia, and it's to me, when I read this, she's not targeting Mike Lindell. She's creating a profile of the type of person who needs to be targeted. And Mike Lindell just happens to make it easier to understand because you're not dealing with something abstract, you're dealing with someone real. But she is um this is I'll just say it. She's creating the basis, the groundwork for a genocide. This is a necessary step in that process. You have to create this boogeyman, dehumanize him, and do it in such a way that anybody associated or affiliated with him should be considered preemptively to be a threat just by their appearance, just by their presentation. And you shouldn't there's a Kafka trap to this, that the fact that he seems so easygoing and trustworthy and humble and self-effacing and all of that is actually evidence of how evil and scheming and Machiavellian and malevolent he is. So it's like the nicer and the more non-threatening the person is, the more you need to see them as a threat. Once you get that mind worm in there, you can see it becomes a positive feedback loop that creates a spiral that accelerates fast. And this is the kind of thing that's being seeded in the minds of people who religiously read these kinds of things. And this is what, I mean, it's been happening, but now it's getting very, very personal. What's up, Poppy Libs? You're muted. You're muted. Let me make sure it's not on my end. Nope, I don't have you muted. Give us just a sec here. We'll get him up and running. There it is.
Oh, I'm talking through my laptop right now instead of the mic.
Okay.
So do you mind the bad quality?
No, it's fine. It sounds fine.
Oh yeah.
I feel bad that you can't get your mic to work.
Well, it's like it was working yesterday, so but yeah, it might be just because I'm coming in, but I'm going to get away from Restream. But anyway, to your point, yeah, it sounds like they're manufacturing consent for a genocide.
Right.
Like this is what's going on right now, because they have a need to manufacture an aggression, or like I guess you could call it a microaggression because the virus is so small. It's a real microaggression, and that's a pretext for real hardcore macroaggression. This is what they're trying to make right now. So by the way, if you're still like have your again, you have your people have their stated preferences, and then they have their revealed preferences, as Mises likes to say. If your revealed preference is still to be living in one of these third world liberal blue state shitholes, it's like, well, you're gonna be first up against the wall.
Right.
At least here in red state America, I can be last up against the wall. But make no mistake, like this is what's coming. This is what they're preparing for, and this is why we need like a real right wing counterattack, quote quote. That a nonviolent, peaceful means hello FBI, I know you're listening.
Yeah.
But
there's
speaking politically, not not democratically.
In Minecraft. Right, yeah, politically, but not democratically.
Yeah. All right, go ahead. Take it away.
There was where was the...
Oh, speaking of which...
this one here.
Great.
What is...
Like my new favorite crack cocaine.
Aren't they amazing?
The strawberry in particular is like my new cocaine.
Yeah.
Get the label and facing frontwards. But I got these today. They're good, but these are amazing. These are like cocaine for me. And these got me like through my father got remarried like a few weeks ago, and I basically consumed a whole tin of these in about 5 days. And,
oh man!
Oh my god! It was like I felt so much better. I got through that weekend, but pretty easily because of that, or else I would have been a ball of anxiety. So shout out to Paloma Verde CBD. Now, I don't know if you did any plugs yet, but
I didn't yet. That's actually a fantastic segue. I was going to do that. Yeah, shout out PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Paloma Verde, fantastic people. You've actually met Carlos and Vanessa, right?
Not personally yet, but I've been on his podcast. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. I was going to reach out to him to schedule. I forgot. I need to write this down. Hold on.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredibly based. That was one of my favorites because it was completely different than my normal archotropism material.
I
And
need to listen to it. I haven't listened to it yet.
yeah, you got, there's a lot of my content you should catch up on. But you did really great in the debate you had with Angela McArdle. And
Thank you.
yeah,
I
that is like, for people who haven't seen it yet, I'm not going to spoil it too much, but it was one-sided, to say the
Yeah.
very least.
Yeah,
Um,
it was hard because I wanted to go. It felt like one that needed to be 2.5 hours, but all of us had time constraints on it. So,
yeah.
and we're trying to get it fit in. We had to reschedule it a bunch of times. So we just needed to get it done and get it out there.
Mhm.
But there was so much more that I wanted to get into. So a lot of times I was trying to keep the subject. I was trying to keep it focused on as close as we could to a single issue and not try to like
It went way
reinvent the
off
wheel
course
on
at the
every
end.
subject. It did. Yeah, it did. It very much went way off. When that's where it started getting really interesting. But so it was what it really revealed to me is that those kinds of we are so far removed from each other. Like we live in completely different worlds. Our presuppositionally we are in opposite corners just about.
Mhm.
And I'm actually I feel more like I feel even better about just the idea that this isn't something to be debated. This
It
isn't
really isn't.
debates on this subject are we're so far apart that debates aren't going to. I don't think anybody's going to go listen to that debate and change their mind. I don't think anybody's going to change their mind either way. I think someone who's undecided is probably still going to be undecided,
You know who
just
I think is
because.
you know who I think is like the next big libertarian to really change his mind? Dave.
Yeah,
I really think so. I know we've been saying he's pot committed at this point. It's like, but I heard his most recent with Jose Gallison, and like he's definitely coming around. Particularly
interesting,
when he, at least for that conversation, he's coming around to the archotropism point of view, and
interesting.
it's like I can see him wrestling with it, and it's gonna win. He's not gonna
Yeah,
win against it. Like that, once you get to where where he's going, like, hey, these incentives, are they're kind of ironclad. They're not really alterable that easily. And by the way, and they're exactly what's coming in to us right now. If you see the incentive, you can see probably what's going to happen. I mean, there's that old, kind of axiom that whatever can happen will happen given enough time.
right.
And I mean, that's just the way incentives work. And this is again this was the argument, because you started to go with archotropes. I'm like, oh no, he's got when you were debating Angela, I'm like, oh god, he's going in for the kill right now. You backed off. You backed off though, and that's like, okay, proud of him. He's showing some low time preference here to not go for the kill right now. But yeah, the like this is totally what's coming. Like these articles you're reading, this is them setting up for the the hammer to come down on blue state America, or at least the unvaccinated, or as they call them, blacks.
Right. The undesirables,
Yeah, the
the deplorables.
undesirable classes are about to get their butts kicked by white privilege America.
Right, right. This actually I just pulled up this tweet because I was gonna talk about this. We'll talk about that in just a second. Another tweet that I just saw come through. It said it's this meme, the hard to swallow pills meme. So it
Mm-hmm.
has the hard to swallow pills, and then it says all the ads you see that look like they're appealing to disenfranchised people are actually targeting upper middle class white women.
Yep.
That's
Oh yeah.
exactly what it is. All of
Truth
this,
is,
all of this warfare is all intra-white warfare. It's ultimately on an archetypical level, it's bougie white people fighting the proletariat white people. Now they don't. It doesn't map perfectly to economic classes because we've kind of transcended economic class, but it's that archetype. It's the archetype of culturally the wealthy middle upper class white person, the type of person who thinks Hillary Clinton is a dedicated public servant and one of the greatest women of all time, versus the flyover state uh, country bumpkin, who cares about things like family and community and like earning a living and creating their own wealth, all of that. That type of person is fun. They have the working class mentality, what's become like a working class mentality. And Jim Goad makes the point that after the Civil War, the the aristocracy, the American aristocracy, took all of the tropes associated with blacks, that they're poor, illiterate, what's undisciplined, prone to
Mhm.
violence, all of these sorts of things, all the tropes that were associated with it. They took them and just picked them up and transplanted them right on top of poor whites.
Yep.
And so poor whites are now, they get all the trailer trash stereotype. So everything is now just kind of like just like they take that trailer trash stereotype that they can't stand. Ultimately, baked into this is this white consciousness that can't stand what they see as the bad parts of whiteness. And so they're trying to purify whiteness. Ultimately, they're descendant from the exact same. This is where the boomer cons actually get it right, where it's like it is the same elitist Democrat aristocracy
Yep.
that is fundamentally motivated by racism. And they're attempting to purify the white race essentially, but they're appealing. They can't be explicit about that anymore because it's not productive. So they've even deceived themselves into believing that they're doing this all out of the benevolence of their hearts, but it's all motivated by disgust for what they see as unclean white people.
And I also say that the reason they're acting so scared right now, this is something I mentioned earlier. They're acting scared right now because, what you're seeing with this homogenization, where both sides, and are really homogenizing into, and they're self-segregating this way because, we have this brand new technology. By the way, the reason, historically, a major reason why states have a vested interest in punishing production is exactly because technology tends to be like climate change and technology are like number one and number two for biggest killers of states. And like in the in the Napoleonic Wars, it was railroads, that those were the things that really just fucked over Germany, and end up leading to a unified Germany in World War I. And before that, it was like blue water navigation that gave us the big navies and ships that could circumvent the established trade routes. You had and before and after World War II was like the microchip. It was like all these new technologies that's like one state falls after another. Social media is the new one because it's a cultural technology that now, because now you used to have all of these pretty well segregated and delineated classes of people that never talk to each other that much. So there wasn't that much ideological transmission between them. And now that you have all of those barriers just gotten blown to smithereens, now you're seeing the real homogenization happen, and it's fucking terrifying to them because now it's like it used to be that you could be an organized minority and control all of the others, but now it's like, okay, everything's out in the open now. And it's like now you have to be an organized majority. It's like they have to be a majority for the first time, and they're freaking the fuck out because
Because ultimately that's not possible. Ultimately, you'll never retain an organized majority.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And basically this purification thing they're going through now is the derived incentive of this new social media technology that's come out and has completely changed the game. And they already got fucked in the ass once with the election of Trump. so
Yeah.
so like they're really really terrified that like, oh, because like enough of these guys have probably read history that they know when Augustus is coming up next.
Right.
And
Yeah.
like
And then, so
they
part
were
of this, the
lucky.
fact that they're getting that they're feeling starting to feel desperate is the fact that they're weak is not a it's not a good sign. Like for the short term, this isn't a good sign because a
Mhm,
weak, desperate, an animal that feels weak and desperate is the most dangerous version of that animal.
mhm.
That's when, I mean, an ant will bite you because it feels desperate. It will turn around and attack something that's millions of times its size. So the thing that is when when they get to the point where they're beginning to feel desperate, and that's when they're going to begin to lash out. That's when they're going to begin to start doing things rashly. And there's going to be a stretch of time where some really egregious things start happening, and people are going to suffer because of it. The extent to which that happens will depend on the extent to which people recognize and understand this and realize the futility of attempting to engage within the existing system, and the futility of attempting to try to come to some sort of a peaceful conclusion or anything like that. As soon as people realize that, and they set their sights on the future, and they're like, we're not going to engage with this anymore. I'm going to do whatever I can to stay out of the radar, stay under the radar, stay out of the eye of Sauron, and I'm going to keep my head down, and I'm going to build, and I'm going to make myself immune from the rest of this. Those are the people who won't necessarily be at as great of a risk. There's still going to be risks, but they will at least be in a put themselves in a better state. The people who are going to get the worst of it are going to be the people who recognize all of this and say, let's keep doing the same thing, but more and louder. And then it'll work. Let's keep trying to rationalize and use argumentation and try to come to a political solution here. Those are the people who are going to be put up against the wall.
Oh yeah. And you know who's going to get really rewarded? The guy who goes up. Remember, chaos demands order. Just think of it in this case, archetropism is actually kind of reversed, because they're the ones who have all the chaos in their heads right now because of all the anxiety and all the vulnerability, all the
Yes.
emotional insecurity. And you see where I'm going with this now. They have a
Yes.
demand for someone to come in and kind of satiate them. That's where the Augustus is going to come from. They're the ones
Yes.
that they're the ones whose chaos is demanding the order.
I've been thinking for a while that
Themselves.
when the Augustus shows up, like Augustus was not Augustus was not good.
No, no.
He he wasn't the same brand of evil as the evil that he was combating. But ultimately he wasn't good or evil. He just was. He wasn't neutral. But I'm saying that if you're looking at it from the perspective of good guys, bad guys, you're not going to understand it. You're not going to
Yeah.
assess it
There's bad
accurately.
guys and worse guys.
Right, exactly. So what's going to come out of this will be a more tyrannical order, but it's not going to ultimately be enforced and pushed through by someone who is one of the existing ruling class. It's going to be someone from outside the ruling class, affiliated with the ruling class, who bridges the gap between the ruling class and the other side, and has the appearance of, I'm putting down all of you. All of you are going down. All of you are going to be, we're restoring order. We're not going to have any more of this. But in order to get that, you have to have the outbreak of chaos and corruption and fighting and violence and all of that, because that's what will ultimately create the demand for the strong man who will step in and assert his will. And it's going to be in the name of restoring ourselves to the Western tradition. We're going to restore
Make
the
America
Western
great
tradition.
again.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
that. I mean, that's it, that. Trump really fit the archetype. He wasn't the guy, but he would like perfectly fit the archetype of who exactly they should be afraid of.
Yep.
And so like that was why they freaked out, even though they really shouldn't have, because like this guy did not understand power at all, and
Right. They
and
made
there
him
was
into
no
much more than
real
he was.
justification for them to be afraid of him, except for the fact he fit them all perfectly to a T.
Right.
Well, like
Right.
former Democrat, now a Republican, and running on a populist message and saying let's make America great again and let's all just get along, and yeah. It's like that was exactly exactly what they were supposed to be afraid of, and he wasn't the guy, and
Nope.
the guy is still whoever the guy is, he's still coming.
You know who's a really interesting candidate that Vin Armani has been is the one who first pointed this out. But the more I think about this, the more, man, it really fits. I think that a really, really good candidate is Matthew McConaughey.
Why do you say that?
Number
I
one,
mean,
if you look at him just from the beginning, if you watch what he's been doing lately, he's clearly prepping for a run for office. It's
yeah, he's
very
a
obvious
governor.
he's
Yeah.
laying that groundwork. Yeah, he's going to run for governor of Texas, and I suspect he's going to win.
Me
And
too.
the idea is to run for governor of Texas and like George Bush, leverage that into James Gentleman says that Venn got that from him.
I could believe it.
Good call, James. That very much I can see where he really fits that bill because ultimately he's like very wholesome. He's like, you know what, come on, guys, let's stop all this fighting, We're like let's just put all the fighting aside. Let's come together, Let's just come together. Let's bridge the divide. Let's work together. Let's stamp out this virus. We don't need to be we don't need to be creating second class citizens and all that stuff. Let's just come together. Let's make America great again. Essentially, I can really I can see that. I can when I sit and I imagine him and I kind of run that simulation.
Hmm.
I can see it very much that he would come across as very unassuming and kind of charming. He's going to have broad appeal.
Hmm.
Like he can give that kind of down home, flyover state Midwesterner kind
Yeah.
of charming. But then he's also like, I mean, he's been embedded in Hollywood for his entire life,
Yeah.
and he's very much a part of the aristocracy.
Does he
So
have that ability to understand power? It's like
that would be the question.
yeah. I mean, that's like the biggest question of all because I haven't seen anybody left or okay. I can see on the far left they understand power, but they don't understand the production side. But it's like it's that true that productive predator or that predatory producer. It's like I haven't seen any really good charismatic one of those yet, and it's like McConaughey. He seems like nothing he's said so far, like really makes me think that he understands the predatory aspect. He now, granted, he comes from Hollywood, which is full of rapists. So I mean, there's a substantial chance he does, but I haven't seen that yet.
I think
But
part of the nature of this would be that
mhm,
you wouldn't see it. Like that's part of that would be if you're thinking about the archetype kind
yeah,
of he would sort of whoever it is the he that we're talking about, not McConaughey specifically, but the he that we're talking about would come from out of nowhere. Would just would kind of just show up on the scene all of a sudden. But it's like once he showed up, then it's like, yeah. It's like you kind of put it together all of a sudden as soon as you see it.
well,
But
yeah,
by
you start to see
definition, he
it.
would fly under the radar, like until the last moment.
Yeah, I mean, like you would never guess that like an artist from Austria is going to be
Right.
the next major strongman until he actually starts giving speeches, and you can see, oh, this guy's like a horrible demagogue.
Right.
And
Or like a journalist
yeah,
like
yeah,
Mussolini.
Mussolini, yeah, and like, but once you see them start talking, usually they're this is like you always have to use like the actions or existence of your enemy to consolidate your own power. And it's like none of them except like DeSantis. He seems to be the only one who has that kind of understanding of there's an enemy class and they need
Yes.
to be they need to be beaten. It's like and he's like Biden, I'm standing in your way, and like he understands the idea that okay, we're going to restore order, we're going to restore safety, and I'm going to be the big strong man to stand in between you guys and the chaos, and that's why you should give me power.
His
And
branding on that, his messaging on that is
perfect,
phenomenal. He
best I've ever seen.
positioned that like 4-minute rant that he just did the other day about Biden and COVID and immigration was just a absolute masterclass in projecting strength and selling protection to vulnerable people, and like that whole thing was just he is everything that Trump larped as.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And if McConaughey starts talking a little bit more like DeSantis, but I guess from a more left wing point of view, like I would start to get very concerned.
Yeah. I
Like
think
that
I
would
think he's gonna come on the scene all of a sudden. It's gonna be
yeah.
like like if he's the one, I think that's how he's gonna come on the scene all of a sudden. He'll win the governorship of Texas, and then he would get a lot of money behind him. That's the big thing is I don't see where DeSantis's money is going to come from. I don't see where I can't see where the ruling class would be incentivized to back him. And that's why I'm skeptical about him. I don't think he should run for president, honestly. I think that he should be the leader of Florida. And I
Yeah,
think there may be more power in that position for him. I don't think that I don't I whoever the next president is going to be effectively a figurehead, who's a front. I mean, like every other one has been, he's gonna continue to be a front for the regime. I don't think that you're going to get that in 2024. I don't think that you're going to get the Augustus. I don't think it's going to happen that quickly.
yeah.
Um,
I mean,
so
between the Caesar war, the war with the post Caesar death, and the reign of Augustus was like a good 15 years.
right,
Augustus didn't consolidate power for another like 15 years, and so that was I don't know if that timeline is going to get sped up with the advent of social media, but it's possible. But yeah, I don't see 2024 happening either, because the thing you have from the left as well is that they have a nasty habit of eating their own.
mm,
I mean, this archetype of Cronus or Saturn eating his own children so they don't overthrow him. It's like, well, I mean, this is kind of what Kamala Harris is doing right now with Andrew Cuomo. Is that Andrew Cuomo is like the one guy, he understands power, he knows how to consolidate it, and he's also popular enough that he could overthrow her, and she hasn't been able to get him out yet. But this is where that battle is right now, where they're kind of locking horns and trying to get each other out. And because I don't know if you've noticed all the stories about her approval ratings going through the toilet right now, but because she's failed on basically every issue, and everyone knows she's the real president,
right.
plugs Biden. It's not him.
Yeah.
Careful, it's Biden. No. But yeah, if anyone, I think they, if any, you know, lower down lefties start to rise up and start really looking good, it's like they're both going to take a truce and go after him, and they're going to
Hmm.
find like, oh, is he going to get Matthew McConaughey going to get Me Too'd or whatever? See, that's the problem with the left, is they have a really nasty habit of eating their own. This is why I ask it, like, do they understand power early? Because if you do, you'll know not to make it make an enemy by being too popular too soon.
Hmm.
And that's the real test for the left, is you have to invade your own predators. Whereas like on the right, we don't really have them. So it's like it's pretty smooth sailing if you're Trump and you're like the one guy who understands anything, or at least instinctively, he must have wonderful instincts to understand how to exactly what the situation is calling for, and what to do, or at least how to act. And he must have incredible instincts for it, because he had no understanding of actual power.
Right.
But but if you're him, it's like smooth sailing. Like nobody was like contesting him. He just kind of cruised into the nomination, and then larped his way into the presidency. It's like he understood exactly what he was supposed to do, as at least instinctively. He didn't know what to do once he got it. He's like the dog who caught the car. And but so if you're on the right, it's really easy to see how you could get the power. If you're on the left, you got to be a whole lot more subtle,
Right.
because they get it.
Right. Yeah,
And,
that's where the real action
and I'm
is.
wondering if it's actually going to be like like one of the CEOs from like these other corporations who are trying to start enforcing the privatization,
Like
because
Benioff.
that's like the big overriding incentive. Like there's layers and layers of incentives. The big overriding one's the privatization of statecraft, and that's where
Right.
I'm thinking that it's going to end up coming from, is one of these ultra subtle CEO types is like, whoa, we're just going to do things a little differently now. And it's like he'll come in on a mandate of look at how much better the private corporations are doing with this governance of society, than how limited limited and feckless the old regime has been because of its constraints. And the
It's going to be
isn't it
like it
like,
might be, maybe it'll be a basis of like trying to pay down the debt or something, and we need to start selling off federal properties or start selling off federal institutions. Uh,
something like that. But it's like someone like that is the only one who actually already have that kind of power to actually pull that,
mhm.
have pull all those kind of strings, because they basically own Congress already. And they have the subtlety to get to the top of those, which are much more difficult, meritocratic organizations than the Congress is, or the state is. So that's where I'm kind of looking for someone from the left. If it's going to come from the left, it's going to come from the corporatocracy, and
My
we're going to be
suspicion
coming
is
down,
that
not up.
right, yeah. My suspicion is that 2024 is going to be a Republican. A Republican is going to win in 2024, precisely because now who knows what happens between now and then, and my opinion could change on that based on how fast things accelerate. But as things stand right now, I think that you're going to get a Republican president because they are ultimately a people in revolt are much more trouble than people who are, watching their bread and circuses. So
Yeah,
ultimately they don't want all of this unrest. All of this unrest is useful to a point, but only for this. You can't sustain this forever. Ultimately, it's going to become wasteful and inefficient. And you ultimately to maintain you can't maintain a police state like that for a really long time. You need people to start policing themselves again. So uh, to maintain the appearance of legitimacy, you can't have this idea of this like one party state appearance. That's my suspicion that it's like we need to give the appearance of power shifting back again to kind of get people off our backs and kind of make people relax and let their guard down. And then you can also accomplish a lot more if you have like a patsy Republican and you get the Republican Party
mm-hmm.
completely under your control. And then you have, I mean, the Democrats obviously are completely under control. I think that's a lot more of a Machiavellian type of approach. So that's my suspicion right now that we're going to get a 2024 a Republican president, and it's not going to be. If that's going to happen, you're not going to they're not going to get trumped again. That's not going to happen. They're not going to. I mean, they've already demonstrated they're not going to allow that.
Yeah,
So if it's a Republican, it's going to be a Republican patsy. It's going to be a Republican who is a Republican in name only, and not just a generic rhino, but it's going to be either it's going to be someone like a Matthew McConaughey, like a celebrity like that, or it's going to be what you're saying, like a CEO that is going to come from the left but run as a Republican, because at this point the parties are so
yeah,
completely bought and paid for that it's really just a formality.
yeah. And that, the incentive again. This is the incentive. What we're talking about here is the incentives of what the situation is demanded. And given enough time, we're going to be correct. It might not be 2024, it might be 2028, but you give it enough time, this is what's coming. This
Mm,
is what this is the incentives that are being demanded of the current situation. Again, these people they're acting. You see that their terror in this rhetoric that we started off with these articles of that when they have to really start demonizing the others and going after the right the way they are, and and trying to purify their people, purify their power base. This is fear behavior. This is them like displaying emotional insecurity.
yeah.
And so like when you have that, again, they're afraid because they know they're weak. Okay, that's like a true thing. It's like they might not be, but they really are. It's like the fact they're afraid shows that it's true. And it's like
Yeah, they're I don't know if weak is the it's
vulnerable.
like vulnerable. Yeah, 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 vulnerable.
They're feeling
Because they're
insecure.
right. So it's like a wounded bear that's cornered or something like
Yeah,
that where
but they know weakness, demands aggression. It
yeah.
demands somebody's aggression. This is the incentive.
So
But it's in reverse where the predator has now become the prey, and they're free,
yeah.
and they know it. And the fact that Kamala has not been able to consolidate power, she's still locking horns with Cuomo, who's still there after getting Me Too about like eight women or something like that. it's like, I mean, this must be really jarring for her and for both of them that, neither has been able to get the other out. And that, I mean, that, this is like their number one competition is from each other, not from the right.
Hmm.
And now that, and, they're, feeling really insecure. Therefore, now they're okay. We have to really start going after the right because eventually one of them is going to come back and get both of us. And this is where that fear is coming from because they can't consolidate power. This is what oligarchy really looks like instead of monarchy.
Hmm.
Monarchy, the power is all consolidated. This is oligarchy, where the oligarchs are trying to fight each other to consolidate the power, and they're kind of at a stalemate, and it's freaking them out. This is attrition now, and this is yeah. And so so now, if you want to be the LPMC and start charging head on when they're like these people are like are freaking out right now, and they're ready to like just they're like in the corner with a shotgun, like ready to shoot anything, and then they're like, oh, there, bang. It's
Both of
like,
them at the same time.
yeah, well, I mean, this is the whole regime is, and the whole ruling class is feeling this way right now. It's like they kind of got surprised by Trump. Yeah, and that really like threw him off because this is the first time in hundreds of years where a total outsider managed to get in. And they're kind of like, wait, what the fuck? This is not supposed to happen. And this is like never happened before, where like a total outsider came in and just took it from him.
And so they
And
had to they had to drop the veneer of legitimacy and do whatever was necessary to patch up that hole, to patch up that vulnerability.
Mhm.
So now this whole process is all a I got a couple more here to read. This whole
Okay,
process is
yeah,
a bunch of
read the
people
articles, yeah.
who are trying to they're manufacturing an enemy that they can use to consolidate their power base. And the LP with the LPMC wants to volunteer themselves as the enemy.
Hmm.
They want to they have the regime has plenty of enemies, but in order to effectively combat those enemies, they need to consolidate it into a single they need to consolidate it into a meme, into a single identity that people can see and instinctively get, and that people will attack on their own so that the regime doesn't have to worry about it. The regime is trying to outsource its power consolidation so that they can focus, so the people within the regime can focus on their internal squabbles and can focus on whatever other freaking like Luciferian shit that they're doing. So when you position yourselves, when you do this, do not comply, fight them. What you're doing is you're saying, "Hey, that enemy that you're looking for, it's me. I will volunteer. I volunteer as tribute.
Yeah.
Send them all after me." And you are providing the glue that holds the regime together
You're
when you
doing the one
attack
thing
them.
that can save them right now.
Exactly. Yes.
And like right now, they're having demand for a weak enemy that they can make to look like they're threatening. So they know exactly how to run against libertarians. They say racist, 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 white nationalist, white supremacist, and they're proud. They're like this Mises group. They're like the Proud Boys,
Proud
and
Boys 2.0.
yeah, except way worse. The Proud Boys were like the moderates. These are the real extremists.
Right.
And,
Right.
it's
Because
like,
they call themselves anarchists.
yeah, they literally call themselves anarchists,
We
and
already have cities that are being burned to the ground. Remember all of last year where cities were just being burned
mhm.
and federal buildings were being ransacked, and see the anarchists, they're a real threat.
They don't just want to defund the police and still keep a few of them around. They want to abolish the police altogether, and it's like,
And then
oh my,
here's how that narrative just inverts immediately, and everyone's like, "Wait, no, see, actually, technically, let me
yeah.
bring to you my factual argument of everything that's wrong about everything you just said."
It's
And
like, no, let's have a nuanced conversation about this. I was like, come on, man.
okay, so this is the next one I wanted to read. So the headline on it is unvaccinated people need to bear the burden.
Oof.
Now, they changed that headline. The first headline was something like unvaccinated people need to be on the no-fly list.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
So the subhead is beyond limiting the coronavirus's flow from hotspots to the rest of the country, allowing only vaccinated people on domestic flights will change minds too. will change minds, not protect us, not keep us safe, not any of those other things. It will change minds. We need to use the no fly list, not for the sake of protection, but for the sake of changing minds, for the sake of making people think all the right things. So she says, when you go to the airport, you see two kinds of security rules. Some apply equally to everyone. No one can carry weapons through the TSA checkpoint. But other protocols divide passengers into categories according to how much of a threat the government thinks they pose. If you submit to heightened scrutiny in advance, TSA PreCheck lets you go through security without taking off your shoes. A no fly list keeps certain people off the plane entirely. Not everyone poses an equal threat. Rifling through the bags of every business traveler and patting down every preschooler and octogenarian would waste the TSA's time and needlessly burden many passengers. The same principle applies to limiting the spread of the coronavirus. The number of COVID 19 cases keeps growing, even though remarkably safe, effective vaccines are widely available, at least to adults. Many public agencies are responding by reimposing masking rules on everyone. But at this stage of the pandemic, tougher universal restrictions are not the solution to continuing viral spread. Tougher universal restrictions are not the solution to continuing viral spread. The restrictions don't need to be, the tougher restrictions don't need to be universal. That's what she's saying. The White House has rejected a nationwide vaccine mandate, a sweeping suggestion that the Biden administration could not easily enact if it wanted to. But a no fly list for unvaccinated adults is an obvious step that the federal government should take. It will help limit the risk of transmission at destinations where unvaccinated people travel, and by setting norms that restrict certain privileges to vaccinated people, will also help raise the stagnant vaccination rates that are keeping both the economy and society from fully recovering. It gets better. Flying is not a right, and the case for restricting it to vaccinated people is straightforward. The federal government is the sole entity that can regulate the terms and conditions of airline safety. And although air filtration systems and mask requirements make transmission of the coronavirus unlikely during any given passenger flight, infected people can spread it when they leave the airport and take off their mask. Now, infected people. You see the switch that was just made here. She's talking about unvaccinated people. Now she's talking about infected people. So the infected people can infect you. Therefore, unvaccinated people need to be. Does the vaccine prevent infection? Interesting. Okay. So beyond limiting the virus, the whole point of international travel bans is to curb infections in the destination country. To protect itself, the United States still has many such restrictions in place. Beyond limiting the virus's flow from hotspots to the rest of the country, allowing only vaccinated people on domestic flights will change minds too. Polls suggest that vaccine holdouts have a variety of motivations: genuine concerns about side effects, skepticism of shots not yet fully approved by the FDA, a general aversion to vaccines, a desire to stick it to the libs, a reluctance to decide, even now, with a link to, I'm sure, some sort of hogwash. In a recent New York Times and Kaiser Family Foundation poll, 46% of unvaccinated people who consider themselves in the wait and see category disclosed that they would stop waiting if they could get a shot from the personal physician. She talks about some statistics about, okay, more than another recitation of statistics about vaccines benefits, or yet another appeal to the common good, the deprivation of movement will win over doubters. Some unvaccinated Americans in areas where vaccination seekers face scorn among their peer group may even be happy to have an excuse to protect themselves. All of this is they're making it explicit. This isn't about protecting people. This is about punishing those who will not do what we want them to. It's all about creating a targeted enemy class that does not receive the same rights and privileges as everyone else. They have preemptively forfeited their rights by not pledging fealty to the regime. That's the language. Again, it's this dehumanization. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're the other class. You know, now they've managed to create a whole other, class in America, and this is always how this begins. But the Oh, I brain farted on what I was about to say. Shoot. Go ahead. The go ahead. Go ahead. Keep reading. There was. Can you maybe read back? What was the
It
last paragraph?
was more than another recitation of statistics about vaccines benefits or yet another appeal to common good. The deprivation of movement will win over doubters. Some unvaccinated Americans in areas where vaccination seekers face scorn among their peer group may even be happy to have an excuse to protect themselves. Prior,
Oh, there it is. Oh yeah, deprivation of movement. There we go.
yeah,
Yeah, only on airlines. You didn't say anything about U-Haul trucks.
hmm. Yet,
Yet.
yet, yeah. Like, I mean, if
But
your goal is deprivation of movement, then you're targeting airlines because the infrastructure exists to target airlines. Uh, it's the easiest form of movement to target, but that
mhm.
doesn't mean that's where it's going to stop.
But this is where something that I've noticed is really interesting is when they start making these calls for state legislation, and then the state fails to do that legislation. Now they're like, oh well, now if the call must fall to the private companies who will step up and do the right thing.
Do
And
their social duty.
for the common good or something like that. This again, this is they're translating it into demand for private statecraft instead of public statecraft. So
Yep.
this is where this distinction that so many blue pilled legacy libs keep falling into, where it's like, oh, it's a private company. I'm like, not anymore. It's a state.
One hundred percent.
This is private statecraft, and that doesn't make it good. Just the fact that it's legitimate, statecraft doesn't make it good. Again, this is a point I made on Pete's show, is that illegitimacy is actually a restraint on government, not the other way around. It's like
Explain that.
and like when you had the old monarchs, everyone knew that this, they're, even though they're probably the rightful owners of the property because people had to buy it from them in the first place. The fact that everyone knew it's like this is the one guy who's in charge, and if something goes wrong, it's all his fault. And and we all understand, like, we're paying it to this guy. And so but if he starts being a tyrant or whatever, then all bets are off. And like, he's here for our protection, but if he does anything wrong, off with his head. And so that because of this, you never had drafts. Draft was something that was invented in France, after they had just killed King Louis and installed Napoleon, and Napoleon wanted to go to war with like 5 countries at once or something like that, and they had to, and of course that didn't work out for him. So when like the Germans were about to knock on the door of France, the French Republic's like, okay, we need to start having a levy on the people themselves. And, and that was how we got the draft. Like, that never happened under monarchy. Forget it. It's like, and taxes never got above like 10% because, anything beyond that was considered like tyrannical. You're like, but my God, you're going beyond what the Bible says. In the Bible, the tax rate was 10%. And that was considered really, really bad and awful. And so you never got above it. But it was because everyone understood this is illegitimate. And the danger of democracy, why it's such a barbaric form of government, is that it has a false sense of legitimacy. Is, oh well, we all voted on it, majority rule,
Exactly.
all the people, majority of the people wanted it, and which is true. Like, a majority did want it, but it's like that. What about the minority? And it's like that's kind of where the problem lies in that. And so this idea that, okay, well, if you have a private company that is completely legitimate, well, it's like, well, then what's holding it back? It's like, well, market forces. Like, apparently not.
Yeah.
It's like, really, which ones would those be? It's like, I don't see them. It's like, where are all these mysterious market forces that are supposed to be holding these airline companies back? Oh yeah, that's right. They're in bed with the state, who helped create all of the regulations that prevented those same market forces from coming in to compete with them. They're only able to do this because they have the state. The state has their back, and they have the state's back. It's a two-way street. It's not
the,
a
the
one-way street.
the corporation is literally a product of the state.
Yep.
The corporation wouldn't exist without the state. It is by definition a state entity.
Yes.
It's
And this,
interesting.
go ahead.
You mentioned Napoleon, and do you know who financed Napoleon's efforts in the Napoleonic War?
I I don't, but I would venture a guess that it starts with an R.
It does. Yes.
Because I remember the story of how that guy with an R, in front of his name, got rich and powerful. Where what was it? The British general, I forget the admiral's name, had defeated Napoleon and his navy. And Lord R had found out about this early, and instead of running home to declare victory, he sent his servant or messenger to run in immediately to the British London Stock Exchange and yelled that the admiral has been defeated. Our British admiral has been defeated. Napoleon's on his way here to sack us.
Huh.
and so the market just sold off immediately. And Lord R decided to buy up everything on the cheap. And then when everyone realized, oh, this was bullshit, it's like prices went back up and he got rich. Now he's a lord.
Yep. The what was created under Napoleon? There's a specific significant institution that was created under Napoleon.
I don't know.
The
It could
Bank
be like
of
the Republic,
France.
huh?
The Bank of France.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, they actually that was when they got the
central bank.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And the Lord R didn't just fund Napoleon; he funded Napoleon's enemies as well.
Oh yeah.
So,
okay.
So this wasn't Napoleon being like, for the glory of France, we're going to conquer Europe. That was the political formula.
Liberty, equality, fraternity. Yay.
Right. Right.
Ideology is the opiate of the masses.
Right.
It's here to control people, not liberate them.
Right. The purpose was to begin consolidating Europe. So we're going to use this strongman to consolidate Europe. Just the same. Look at who funded Lenin. Look at who funded Hitler. Look at who funded Mussolini. Look at who funded FDR. All of them. They're all funded by the same people. The whole purpose, when you look at all of these, the Bank of France was the bank that precipitated the Great Depression. When you look at these, when you look back through history and you look at it in terms of countries being like the sovereign unit that's operating, especially over the last 200, 300 years, you're not going to get the clear picture of what's actually happening. The countries' governments, I don't mean by the country, I don't mean like the geography. I mean the governments that represent the country. They're fictions that are created as a front for the actual money that's moving behind the scenes.
Yeah, so the actual value that's being exchanged by the predation.
Right. So the actual movers and shakers, the financiers, they don't have national alliances. They aren't operating as representatives of a nation. They're operating as representatives of their own financial interests. So when you begin to review history through that lens, everything starts to make a whole lot more sense. You understand why World War II naturally followed from World War I. You understand why World War I happened when it did and in the way that it did, and why the Fed came before World War I, why the Great Depression happened when it did and how it did, and then why World War II happened when it did and how it did and in the way that it did. All of these things were all driven by financial interests. We'll say it that way.
Yeah. Oh, to say the very least, yes.
Okay, anyway, so back to this article here. This one. The last, right at the end of this one, and then I have one more after it. It said okay, relying so heavily on mask requirements to protect the flying public has had a distinct downside. The duty of preventing viral transmission has fallen to gate agents and flight attendants, who must enforce mask rules, and whom angry passengers have in turn subjected to harassment. Moreover, masks can provide protection only during a flight, but for passengers, the whole point of flying is to take part in life outside the destination airport's grounds. By requiring proof of vaccination for flights, the US government will better protect society and get out of the business of helping the coronavirus proliferate in another place. People who still want to wait and see about the vaccines can continue doing so. They just can't keep pushing all the costs on everyone else. Again, I want to highlight the way that this is being framed. The premise here is that the unvaccinated are a burden that everyone else is bearing. The unvaccinated are engaged in aggression from their perspective. The unvaccinated are illegitimate actors from the baseline. And the purpose of these things are punitive measures to punish the people who are making themselves a burden to everyone else. But most of all, note that he says, or she says, interestingly, she says she is Juliette Kayyem, a former assistant secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She teaches the Homeland Security program she's the faculty chair of the Homeland Security program at Harvard. And she's a former member of the Obama administration. This is your government. This is the regime right here. The way she frames this is first she said flying on an airplane isn't a right. It isn't a human right. So, but then she flips around on the other side, and it's not a legitimate argument to say, well, the people who don't want to be infected or who are at risk can just not fly. Because, I mean, it's not a human right. What she's set up is that flying is a human right for people who count as humans. If you're not vaccinated, you don't count as a human. You don't have the right to fly. The people who are vaccinated, they have a right to fly. And they need to be made free to fly. So the people who are unvaccinated are compromising the freedom and violating the human rights of the people who are vaccinated. That is the frame that she has established. What she's doing is she's operating from rhetoric of liberty and freedom and human rights. That's her that's her frame. This is the problem, one of the many problems with the idea of liberty or freedom as a virtue. It's an empty suit. It's an empty suit that will ultimately be worn by power, and power will use it toward its own ends.
I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same suit as private property.
Yes.
And if you this is why I say, hey, if we're gonna have this whole anarchy thing, the left can't be a part of it. I'm sorry,
right.
They need to be physically removed, because this is exactly the sort. Because now you're giving them the legitimacy of statecraft, and by the way, they're not going to use it for merely legitimate statecraft. They're going to use it to as a like a staging area for illegitimate statecraft. And this again, this is what's coming. This is the incentive now that we have this rampant private property basically everywhere on the planet. Now begins the consolidation phase. Kind of what you alluded to earlier with the particular financiers, whose job it is to now start consolidating all of the governments. And now they already have them kind of bought off. Now they just need to start erasing all the lines between them.
Exactly.
This is the idea of globalization, because now what they want to do is create a one world private legitimate government, that is built on private property, because that is the ultimate power of government, is a legitimate one where they are the legitimate owners. And this is what's coming, and this is what I think a process that we're going to have to hijack if we want to have any semblance of right-wing liberty or spontaneous order and human rights in the future. It's like we need to get on get on this train right now. Instead of fighting against it, run with it and try to divert it into a different direction, like hack the process.
Yes.
We're going to be doing it like a binary injection into their process that's going to distort it and cause errors to propagate.
Mm,
because I mean that's like best case scenarios if we can get like kind of like a hacker. You don't try to do your own thing. You try to take over another pre-existing thing on their own process on their own on the target's computer system or something like that.
mm,
You don't create a new thing. You just take over an existing thing and re-engineer it to do something different. The same way a
mm.
virus works is that it doesn't create a new cell. It just takes over an existing cell and gets it to do something a little different, and errors propagate out.
Right,
And
right.
this is what I see as our best case scenarios. Because again, if you start fighting, against this, they're going to be like, "There's a target. Let's go after it." It's like they're
Exactly.
looking for a target right now. They're looking for a someone to bring the hammer down on. And if you offer yourself up as that, you're going to get the hammer. But if you
Yes.
offer to kind of help it along, quote quote, and that if they have all this chaos in their heads, and you're offering to kind of satiate that chaos and join them, that's the thing that they're going to be welcoming to, and their defense systems are going to go down. That's when the exploit goes in, and the code executes and runs, and then the fun starts to happen.
And you're not speaking hypothetically either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not talking about hacking their computer systems. Never. I mean,
Right.
that's illegal. I would
You're
never.
talking about Minecraft.
Yeah. Well, not even Minecraft, because that's a computer game. It's like I'm not even talking computers at all. I would never do
You're
that.
talking
I'm
you're,
re-
you're
I'm
talking
really
about
here to
actual minds.
I'm really here to have a mind virus, a real mind virus. That's
Uh-huh.
actually going to change the way people think, and make them more amenable to the particular ruling classes whims. I'm going to make them go with the stream rather than against it, and just the stream itself is just going to go a different way.
You made a really interesting point in a conversation I recently that when you were touching on it here, but I want you to elaborate on it more. The when how did you frame it? You said something about like when private property is the basis of legitimacy, then uh what you've just done is you've created an incentive for those who want, or what it wasn't legitimacy, it was power. When private property is associated with power, and which is I guess
Oh, I
legitimacy,
know what you're talking about.
then
When you create Ancapistan and you say my property, my rules, what you just did unintentionally was you tied the right to statecraft. You didn't abolish the right to
yes,
statecraft. You tied it to the land. So whoever owns the land, whoever owns the property, has the right to statecraft.
you just
So,
created a mind virus that incentivizes people to work toward the goal of owning all of the land.
and this is why when you invented capitalism in the 1400s, you made this inevitable.
Yep.
It's like 600 years ago, the planetary global government that's private and legitimate. You made it, whatchamacallit, you made it, inevitable. It was going to happen, because this was the way private property would evolve. It would have to evolve that way, where you're saying my property, my rules, my decision. I own my body, et cetera, and I make the rules about what happens with it. And well, again, you just if I want to aggress against my own body, with drugs or fornication or divorce or whatever, then that's my right. And it's like, well, okay, you just tied the right to statecraft to property ownership, and and it's legit, and now you don't have the bar of legitimacy. Legitimacy is not it's not a constraint on government anymore. And well, okay, that's going to have consequences, because that what was just an economic asset now has a power value to it too. There are two values associated with property now. One is economic, the other is like statecraft and power. And so now, and you're saying that I can have more power by making this thing over here, this state over here, private. You're telling me that's the case now? You don't say. What would
We
I?
need to
What's a reptile going to do? Yeah. It's like it's really obvious as you're telling them that, because these are, again, this is like the human action maxim. It's like they axiom is like, hey, that they want to humans want to optimize. They want to have the most value with the least means, And and so if you're telling them that this is the way they get rid of what illegitimacy they had left is to privatize the republic, well, they can have more power that way. It's going to happen because you just told them that. And Capistan, this is what I said. We're already kind of living in on Capistan, and because it's
Right.
already, we already prohibited aggression, and which created the cartel, the black market for which centralized itself into what we call the state now. And this is what prohibiting aggression looks like. And now you just told the reptiles that if they make it, if they just privatize that, then they can have even more power. It's like, well, that's in their vested interest. And so they're going to go out of their way to engineer whatever situation they want to get that to make that happen.
And you're about to find out that that private property isn't a virtue. That private property isn't like that. That property ownership and the concept of private property isn't innately good. It isn't a society built upon the premise of private property isn't a moral or ethical or good society. I tweeted earlier today. I said a whole lot of people are waking up to the reality that the only rights you have are the ones you can enforce for yourself. You might have the most airtight argumentation in the world, but it means nothing when the rest of society abandons argumentation. This article I just read, this person isn't interested in debating the nature of the virus or the efficacy of vaccines or anything like that. Their argumentation, the time for argumentation is done. Now is the time for removing those who want to argue from society. If you don't fall in line, you're going to be removed from society. You don't have rights.
I want to argue. Oh, pick me, pick me, pick me.
I have the best arguments.
Yes, I have the best arguments. Here I am. Come get me.
Rights are secured by force. If you aren't capable of using force to protect your rights, you don't have any. That you can say, I ought to have rights. I was just talking about this with my little sister. Shout out Heidi. I think she's watching live right now. She's down here visiting, and she and I, we had a fantastic conversation last night about Orthodox Christianity, and she's studying the Reformed. She's going to a Reformed school and studying all that right now. So
it's
she's
more than a little bit different than Orthodox.
Yeah, it's very different, yet there's a lot of things that are very similar. It's interesting.
Yeah.
We were discussing the those things yesterday. So we were just talking about this, and she was thinking through it when I read it to her. Rights are secured by force. If you aren't capable of using force to protect your rights, you don't have any. She's like, okay, well, so you ought to have rights. And then she and I both went, at the same time. That just because you ought to doesn't mean it is. Ought and is are two different things, right?
Yep.
So rights are ultimately. This was one of the big red pills for me. Was this is one of the big red pills was the realization that peace depends upon violence. To have peace, you have to have the capacity and the threat of violence.
Mm-hmm.
That the more and this is the entire premise behind the right to bear arms. It's that you have to have the ever-present capacity to commit violence, and when you have that, then you can have peace. That premise, then it like if you're going to talk about having rights, if you're going to instantiate this constitution with rights and everything, it depends upon people agreeing. If people stop agreeing, those rights go away. They don't exist anymore, except to the extent that you can enforce them for yourself or for other people. And inevitably, your paradigm has to be able to do something about predators, because invariably predators will arise who will sell statecraft services to those who don't feel like they can protect their own rights. They will outsource the protection of their rights to predators. And those predators will then use those additional resources, that additional power, that additional legitimacy, whatever it is, they will take those assets and they will use them to accumulate more. If your system cannot accommodate for that, if your system cannot manage predatory instincts and people who will use the rules to break the rules, your system will extinguish itself. and it becomes indistinguishable from a system that actively facilitates those things.
Bingo.
And this is the problem with Angela in the debate. She said, "It seems to me like you don't want me to spread the ideas of liberty.
I
Why
don't
is
want you
that?"
to make yourself a target. It's
Yes,
like,
I don't want you to make yourself a target, and I don't want the ideas of liberty. I don't want the ideas of liberty being associated with this kind of behavior. Because ultimately, if you want liberty, you're not going to get it through this avenue. And attempting to get it through this avenue decreases the likelihood of liberty in our lifetime because
yeah,
you're now engaged in the process of actively facilitating those who would destroy liberty.
you're trying to get liberty by acting like prey.
Right, right.
It's like that's not how that works. That you don't become free by like is the meek shall inherit the earth. Again, this idea that hey, you're going that you have a sword and you're able to use it, but you're going to keep it in its sheath. It's like that's very different than what they're doing. Is we're harmless, we're helpless, and we have the best ideas, and we're going to come oppose you. Please make us your boogeyman.
Everyone else should make themselves harmless as well. We should all be harmless together.
Yeah, it's like we're taking a route that is deliberately harmless, and it's like this is prey behavior. This is not how you get liberty, and this is something kind of predicted by that second law of archotropism about how power likes to consolidate itself from low concentration to high concentration, and the consolidation of power is what's defined as predation, from the predator's point of view. So if you have, basically because of, of this, that basically it's the percent chance that, the predator is going to have some sort of real harmful retaliation against him, that multiplied by the chance of reward or whatever. It's the EV equation that every poker player knows. So if the bigger you make that expected value by saying, okay, there's the chance of me having real retaliation is extremely remote, that's a much more enticing, gamble for the predators to make. So that like they're going to make that, that bet a much higher priority bet. Like if there's a 90% chance of me winning a lot of money versus like a, 30% chance of me losing a little bit of money, I'm going to prioritize the one over the other. And basically by coming in and saying, hey, we are the most effective producers and we're completely harmless. It's like that's what you just told themselves there's like basically a 100% chance they're going to take a lot of money from you or take a lot of value out of you, and you're now waving you're waving a bullseye, you're waving a red flag and trying to draw attention to yourselves that this is a place where they can get a lot of value out of you at your expense. And so they're going to make you a priority and a priority for their predation because there's a much more value at much less risk.
Bingo.
And so if you're doing this if you're spreading this message of liberty in a really bad way, oh boy, you're going to get what's coming to you. It's not right. I'm not saying it should happen. Obviously I think you and I both kind of like the LPMC. We're not, we're definitely not their enemies, but we are trying to, point out that these are the incentives, and like ideology isn't the problem. Incentives are the problem.
Yes.
And when ideology is just the rationalization for the incentives. And so you're arguing with the rationalization, which is kind of a secondary thing. It's not the driving force. You're arguing with the product of the driving force, which is the incentive.
Yeah, it's a sucker's game.
Yeah, you need to deal with the incentive. This is it's the bait. Having the best arguments is bait.
Yes.
This is having the most power is what you really want.
The entire premise of the marketplace of ideas is wait for the idiot to speak up so you know who to smash. That's the whole premise of it. The whole premise of it is have this appearance of a marketplace of everything is open and free and just everyone, speak up, volunteer yourself. What it is anybody who's a traitor to the regime, show yourself.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's
that's exactly it.
One of the commentators said Obama was right. War is peace. I guess he deserved that peace prize after all. It's not that war is peace. It's that the capacity for war brings peace. Having the capacity for war, which is not just like owning guns doesn't protect you. Having the ability to use them and to benefit from using them is what protects you. So right now, the Second Amendment is completely irrelevant at this point because they locked everybody in their houses and you didn't use if somebody when the Second Amendment was written, if somebody had said they're going to lock you in your houses for a year and a half, is that a justified use? Is that a justified time to use employ the rights that are being not granted, but the rights that are being affirmed by the Second
Mhm.
Amendment? They would have been like,
Like, duh.
is there is there
Nothing
anything
sure that it gets
worse?
to that point.
Like, right, yeah. So the fact that no shots were fired over that means that that line has been crossed and is no longer like it right
Well,
now.
what it
What you did
means.
is you said is the Second Amendment people said unless you cross if you could do anything, but if you cross this line, that's where it's too much for us. So they're like, okay, well, we'll do everything except for cross that line. Okay, now what? Oh, I guess you can't even use it anymore because
Well,
now anybody who uses it is just going to get squished like a bug.
well, this is something Burnham actually talked about in the Machiavellians was that people need the leaders. Revolutions are not led by the proletariat; they're led by the bourgeois.
Yep.
And so you had all of the proletariats who were like, okay, I got my gun, I'm ready to fire. When are we going to kill these people? And there's no leader. Yeah, we're all looking around for a leader. This is why none of us ever fire a shot. We didn't have one, not one right wing leader ready to say, okay, it's time to start shooting. And that was why the shooting didn't happen. It wasn't for a lack of guns, wasn't for a lack of will. It was for a lack of leaders. That
Because
was the
those
one.
guns can't be fired in every different direction.
Can't do it.
They need the fire has to be
Bingo.
concentrated, and
Bingo.
then it needs to not only be able to be concentrated. So for the fire to be concentrated, there has to be someone who concentrates it, but then it has to be mobile and it has to be able to concentrate anywhere at a given moment. Unless you have that, the rest of it is irrelevant. Having the most armed country in the world might be fine on an individual basis in terms of like maybe somebody's not going to break into your house,
Yeah.
but your concern shouldn't be somebody breaking into your house. Your concern should be somebody taking your house.
Yeah, or
you
like
know,
locking you in it.
right.
Making your house your cage.
Yes. So
And
the it's that ability. That's where the leadership comes in. The leadership takes all of these guns, like metaphorically speaking as well. It takes all of the minds and it consolidates them all and focuses it. It concentrates and focuses it, and that's where the difference is made. We have this idea of like the majority and like having like a big gigantic club or something. But what's even better is a needle that goes straight to the heart.
yeah, or you need a right wing leader who's going to rip the mask off of democracy and democratize it.
Yep.
that you know what I mean. It is a real equivocation there, but
hmm
it's like you need to rip the benefit of a real right wing leader is that he will rip the mask off of democracy and kind of reveal it for what it is, because we did spread quite a lot of democracy in the Middle East.
Oh yeah. Yep.
What wasn't quite what the people meant by it, but it's real democracy. Democracy is war by different means and sometimes the same means.
Yep.
Uh,
Because democracy is politics and politics is war.
yeah, bingo.
Okay, so this last what?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh,
I was handing it back to you.
so this last piece here, I'm just going to read through it real quick. It's not that long. This one is to me, this one is the whopper. So the headline is "We're talking about vaccines all wrong." To reach vaccine conspiracists and other skeptics, focus on what they care about most: freedom without repercussions. So again, as I'm reading this, think about the picture that's being painted of the people he's talking about. Imagine when he's like hear his words and through them understand what he's thinking of, the image of a person that he has in his mind that he's trying to describe.
Oh my god. Oh, it just hit me. Go ahead.
What?
No, go
Oh,
ahead. I don't want to spoil it, but you just hit it on the head.
so far this year, freshman Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has outraised all of her GOP colleagues in the House, raking in $4.53 million in the first 6 months of 2021. Among congressional Republicans, only Senators Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley have raised more. Yes, Green is paying quite a bit to raise those funds, but it remains a staggering amount for an incumbent in a safe red district, especially when most of it has come from small donors. What on earth do people think they're buying with that money? One thing her donors are definitely not buying is a coherent political message. Last week, after being suspended by Twitter for 12 hours for falsely claiming that there had been 6,000 vax related deaths, it's hurting me to just read this stuff, but I have to read it because those are the words in front of me. She held a press conference in which she repeatedly contradicted herself, arguing at one point that the number was actually higher, while also appearing to agree with her colleague Steve Scalise that the vaccine is safe and effective. Asked by reporters for her actual beliefs, Green deflected, embracing instead the mantra of conspiracy theorists everywhere: do your own research. I encourage people to make up their own mind, she said at one point, before echoing a few minutes later the old conspiracy theorist standard that someone should be looking into all of this. You see, there's a lot of things happening, and I think we should analyze all of it before governments and schools and business say, absolutely, you have to take this vaccine. So there, first of all, what he's painted is that if you are inspired to to double check the experts, to fact check the experts, then there's something wrong with you. You shouldn't ever need to do your own research. Like, that's immediately being cast into question. What Green is offering and what her supporters are buying is not an alternative theory, but rather freedom. The freedom to disregard acknowledged authorities like Anthony Fauci, and the freedom to come to your own conclusions. These are being framed as bad things. The freedom to disregard acknowledged authorities. Acknowledged by whom? The freedom to come to your own conclusions. So I should come to someone else's conclusions, apparently. Although we tend to think of conspiracy theories as dark, paranoid, and unsettling, for the conspiracists, they can be quite liberating because they free you from having to accept things you don't want to believe. Writing about rumor and urban legend in America, the sociologists Gary Allen Fine and Patricia A. Turner borrow a phrase from the French anthropologist Claude Levi Strauss, who has said that some ideas are simply good to think. That is, we subscribe to some ideas not necessarily because they're true or defensible, but because the simple act of believing them brings a kind of reassurance and pleasure. The irony here is just shattering the computer screen.
Oh my God, I can't believe they actually admitted that. I mean, I was just like lambasted on Twitter for saying exactly that, that people behave their incentives, not their ideas, and they
Yes.
rationalize backwards. It's like, I got
Yes.
so much shit for saying exactly that. And here the enemy is like just saying some ideas are good to think, not because they're true, but because they give you power.
Bingo.
Like, yes, thank you.
So these are being presented as threatening people, as completely unhinged, disconnected from reality, people who are believing whatever they want because they believe in freedom. So here, freedom he's taking freedom and he's framing it as a bad thing. Freedom is bad because then people will believe whatever they want. And they're using it, what he's framing is these are dangerous people who are pursuing power. As Fine and Turner note, urban legends and conspiracy theories are good to think because, quote, they connect to a powerful cultural logic that makes sense to narrators and audiences. Plausibility is key. Rumor permits us to project our emotional fantasies on events that we can claim really did happen, protecting ourselves from the implications of our beliefs. Close quote. By rejecting the dominant narrative without providing a substantive replacement, Green offers her audience the freedom to cherry pick sources and devise a narrative that best fits their biases, disregarding anything that collides with their worldview. Again, the Alinskyism here is absolutely staggering.
And always accuse your enemy of what you are in fact guilty of.
Bingo.
I can't. It's like God. It's like that hypocrisy is not a bug; it's a feature.
Yes. The historian Philip Deloria once described Americanness as, quote, a particular working out of a desire to preserve stability and truth while enjoying absolute anarchic freedom. Close quote. It is this impulse for irresponsible freedom, embedded within the framework of a stable social service net, that Green and her cohorts crave. They want the freedom to not wear a mask with the assurance that they'll be well taken care of at a hospital if they do get sick. And they want not only their access to the social safety net protected, but also their access to social media and the connection to American culture that comes with it. Green's outrage over her Twitter suspension, beyond being an obvious publicity stunt, reflects a genuinely acute anxiety of a movement at a turning point. They're anxious. They're anxious. They're at a turning point. Again, this is all projection. But notice
Believe
how
it.
freedom is being framed. Freedom, the right to, or the what was it, the freedom to not wear a mask with the assurance they'll be well taken care of at a hospital if they do get sick. The impulse for irresponsible freedom embedded within the framework of a stable social service net. Irresponsible freedom. Like, again, if you are opposing these people and you think you're presenting a solution and what you're advertising is freedom, you are stepping into the trap. The trap is laid. You are walking into it if you're promoting freedom. One of the most consistent arguments Green put forward in her press conference is the idea that people who choose not to wear masks or be vaccinated should not be socially ostracized for their beliefs. This gets to the core of the anxiety driving the anti-vax movement. They want all the rights, privileges, and benefits of human community without any sense of obligation to be responsible participants in that community. I'm going to always be in the camp that it should be people's choice, Green said during her press conference. I just think we're going down a really bad road when we're telling people you have to do this, and if you don't do it, you're excluded. You're treated like a second-class citizen. You're not allowed on campus. You're going to be fired from your job. We're not going to let you in church because you refuse to take this FDA-approved vaccine. I just think that it's the wrong place for us to go as Americans. If we can recognize that the real gift Green is offering is not misinformation so much as it is freedom, we might be able to approach the problem of misinformation differently, particularly surrounding COVID-19 and vaccines. Researchers, one thing that's weird about this is it's like talking about someone when they're in the room with you.
Kind of, yeah. But what, you know, for me, what they did there, I just heard them equivocate freedom with misinformation.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. The freedom to believe whatever you want.
That, yeah,
Freedom is
now
doing what the experts don't approve. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Researchers have known for years that shaming people to get vaccinated often ends up backfiring, and that much of this is because vaccine resistance is heavily correlated with notions of personal liberty. The people we're trying to reach, like, who is we? Like, this person is writing, clearly not writing, like, it's the Atlantic. It's like a national publication, but he's talking as if he has a captive audience that is distinct altogether from the people that he's talking about. The other already exists. The other is implied in the way that he's talking.
I would say that it's actually true because his audience, if you remember who owns this thing, that's the real audience because that's the funder. It's like, yeah, right. He's responding. You know, this is a recirculation of, you know, hey, the opinion you're going to write comes down, and then they regurgitate it back up to them. And this is their audience is the ruling class, I should say, the left class now, because now you have two classes, left and right.
Like, and what I'm highlighting is he's not even pretending that's not the case. He's moved beyond that point. He's not even pretending to talk to all Americans. He knows that all Americans aren't paying attention to him. He's in-group signaling. He's laying out the strategy to the in-group. He's describing the path forward to the in-group and speaking about the other as the other. If Green's supporters, the people we're trying to reach are not motivated to act on behalf of others, and they won't respond to exhortations of civic responsibility. They are not motivated to act on behalf of others. That's a hell of a thing to just declare. If Green supporters now, the way that this is being framed, he is taking the position of the person advocating civic responsibility. This is the pivot. Now, the conservative position is to ostracize the anti-vaxxers from society. That's the conservative position. He's coming at this from a conservative right-wing perspective. That this is civic responsibility. We need to establish order. This is archetropism in action.
Responsibility is how you get your rights. Yeah.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
You know, and
it starts with responsibility.
You have them. Yeah.
Yes. If Green supporters want freedom without repercussions, focusing on consequences for this freedom might give us more leverage than we might think, particularly if we can shift the focus from freedom versus obligation, the way conspiracists like Green prefer to frame the issue, to different kinds of freedom. Vaccines offer us the freedom to participate, the freedom to circulate back in the world, the freedom to be human again,
Oh my God, did they really just say that?
the freedom to be human again.
Holy shit. How explicit can you get?
The Washington Post, for example, reported on one vaccine holdout who got her shot so she could attend New York Yankees games in person. When the Dallas Morning News asked prominent citizens of North Dallas why they got vaccinated, some spoke in terms of obligation and protecting others, but others spoke of the possibilities associated with the vaccines. Robert Jeffress, the pastor at First Baptist Church, echoed Green's line at first, stating that we are not trying to force anyone to be vaccinated. That is a personal choice. But he went on to say that vaccination is, quote, the quickest way for Christians to come back to church safely so that we can enjoy the encouragement we all need that comes from worshiping together, end quote.
Mark of the beast.
It's a tricky but promising rhetorical move. You can choose to do whatever you want, but the rest of the world is waiting for you if you choose to get vaccinated.
Which vaccinated how many times? Yeah.
Right, right. If you consent, if you choose to engage into to enter into the lifestyle of being vaccinated, not getting a vaccination, but entering into the lifestyle to of being vaccinated on a regular basis.
It's not enough to consent once. You have to consent to them multiple times.
You
And
have to
this,
continually assert your loyalty to the party.
mm-hmm. And I mean, this is that Luciferianism of consent, where that just gives them that much more power. They want that power, and they're willing to force you to consent. That's what it's not consent that's necessarily Luciferian. It's that you're being forced to consent and really heavily coerced into it. And like they will exact real hardcore punishments on you if you do not consent to them. And that's it couldn't get more explicit than this, that like you are not human to us if you don't, and gosh, I can't believe they actually used those words, the freedom to be human again.
Yeah. Now, as the Delta variant threatens a fourth wave, more and more public figures have begun to focus on the other half of this equation, increasing the social pressure and repercussions that come with remaining unvaccinated. Disbelief and frustration that anyone would decline to be vaccinated are giving way to pure anger, and businesses, schools, and individuals have run out of patience accommodating those resisting inoculation. New York City has announced that all of its employees, including the vaccine-resistant ranks of the NYPD, only 43% of which have been fully vaccinated, must get vaccinated or face weekly tests. California's statewide university systems have instituted similar mandates, and even the Biden administration is considering a vaccine mandate for all federal workers. Individuals can still opt out, but to do so may mean constant testing and screening, social distancing and mask requirements, and travel restrictions. The goal being, it seems, to put an increasing social burden on holdouts so long as they continue to endanger others. Green will continue to push the rhetorical move that Americans deserve not just freedom, but freedom without consequence. On Sunday, she shifted from Holocaust analogies to Jim Crow analogies, tweeting out a photo of a sign reading "No vax, no service" with the comment, "This is called segregation." But it's less clear how long this tactic will succeed. Even Alabama Governor Kay Ivey made a distinction not between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, but between vaccine holdouts and regular folks. Talking to reporters last Thursday, she lamented that folks are supposed to have common sense, but it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down. Unvaccinated folks and regular folks. Last paragraph.
Go ahead.
With Mobile's Fox 10 reporter Stephen Moody, when Mobile's Fox 10 reporter Stephen Moody went in search of reactions to the governor's comment, he found mostly agreement. Imagine that. I can't believe that he just so happened to find mostly agreement. It's got to be a sign.
Incredible.
I never thought I would agree with Kay Ivey, a woman named Sabrina Lewis told him, but I agree. I know it's a personal choice, but so we can continue to enjoy things like this, people should give the vaccine a try.
Well, also those other people aren't persons. It's a personal choice, and they're not persons. So I'm a
Right. So
person.
they don't
I'm
need
going to
personal
choose for them.
choice.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. That's what they mean by choice.
For Lewis, as with so many millions of other Americans, vaccines mean freedom. Not just freedom to participate in a human community, but also freedom from social stigma. Meanwhile, the only person Moody could find who disagreed with Ivy's comments would speak out against them only if she could remain anonymous.
Wow. And like I guess that's right there. I mean, they just admitted their selection bias is that the only people who are willing to disagree with them are only want to do so off the record,
Right.
because it's like,
And it's
oh, you want to have your name on the record, in a newspaper as being unvaccinated? Like, hell, fucking no.
and the reason that you would end the piece with that sentence would be as an implicit threat. Look,
Yeah,
it's working. It's
yeah.
working.
He's like,
Yep.
you're afraid of us. That's exactly what they just admitted. It's like I can't believe we didn't find anyone who was willing to disagree with us publicly. It's like,
Yeah.
fuck, I can't imagine why they would be so afraid of us. Why would you be afraid of me? What would I ever do to you besides take away all of your actual freedom and unperson you?
Call you not human.
Yeah,
Just a
and
second here. I wanted
personal
to.
choices are for persons. You know, the right class are not persons.
Yep. Okay, the author, Colin Dickey, is the author of Ghostland, An American History and Haunted Places. He's like, he has one other piece that he's written for The Atlantic. 2016, November 14, 2016, The Broken Technology of Ghost Hunting.
Oh my God, these are our rulers.
This is how does how does he how does he write that piece 5 years ago, and then the next one that he writes is this one?
It really, it's like hearing that, I never would have guessed it, but it is almost a white pill to me, because I've always said, for a long time I've been saying our rulers are so incredibly unimpressive,
Yeah.
and their weakness demands my aggression. I mean, someone else's aggression.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was always taught, Andrew, you shouldn't beat up on people who are less intelligent than you. And I'm beginning to think I was mistrained, or not beginning to, but my Christian education may be backfiring a little bit, and may need an operating system update, to say the very least, because it's like this sort of the fact that these are the rulers. I mean, the Bible even says that was it when the mask is finally ripped off, and people are like, when they look at Satan, they're like, this is the guy that caused
Mm.
all of this problem, and they're gonna be like, oh, he's such a pathetic little shit. And I'm really seeing the mask ripped off of our satanic Luciferian rulers right now, that these people are so unimpressive. I'm getting told I'm not a human by some guy who's like ghost hunting.
Yeah. Little
This is
soy boy worm.
and I'm sure the others who wrote those articles were at least as unimpressive.
Right.
And
This is the product of a society that made the mistake of disincentivizing bullying.
yeah, no wonder they were afraid of a strongman Augustus coming up. It's
Right.
like, no wonder these puny little pukes are afraid of someone coming along, and you know really tearing the system to the ground. No wonder they overreacted so much to Trump. They're afraid because they should be.
But here's the good news. This
Mm-hmm.
is the absolute good news. When the boxcars come, they're going to be privately owned. So at the very least, it won't be tyranny that takes us out. It's going to be privately owned boxcars. You even get to choose your own boxcar.
And they'll swipe your credit card on the way in.
Right? You're gonna pay for the right to ride on the Amazon branded boxcar.
Yep. And or you could sign up and join Mises GOP, and we can avert that future and
Yes.
change the instead of going against the stream, we're going to change the stream.
Ooh, I like that. There was a headline on, I think it was Cato or Reason or something like that. It said privatize the mask mandate.
Oh my god. Did they really?
Yes.
Oh my god, fucking useful idiots.
Wait, let me see what
Wow.
outlet it was. Privatize the mask mandate.
I mean, it
Um.
sounds like a Cato thing.
Yeah, I don't know where it is. It's I don't remember what the exact phrasing of it was, but I got to get out of here. So, this
Alrighty.
is fun. Thanks for coming on, man.
Oh, I
And
always love it.
thanks to the people in the chat. This was a fun conversation. I enjoyed it. We got 25 people watching and 22 likes on the video. So good work, guys. Do us a
Definitely
favor. Go ahead.
like, share, Paloma Verde,
Bingo.
and
PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Use promo code KING. Get 25% off any order over $75. And we will see you guys next time.
thank you to Liberal Steve for letting me keep his seat warm for him.
Yeah.